welcome back to the Futureprint Tech Fest. I'm Karis Kopp and delighted to be joined by Nadina Using, Account Manager at Industrial Inkjet Limited. Thanks so much for being with us, Nadina.
Not a problem, Karis. I'm delighted to be here.
Good. Yeah, it's fantastic to have IIJ back. It's your first time at a Futureprint event talking.
It is, yes. Yeah, it's a whole new world for me.
Yeah, really exciting. And I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation because it's the Tech Fest. You know, a lot of it's kind of technical, some of it's more big picture. But what we're looking at here is a particular customer and how industrial inkjet technology solved a problem that they had. So we're going to be talking about Merca, which I know is the account that you, one of the accounts you work on there at IIJ. Maybe we could start by talking a little bit about who Merca are and your relationship with them and how the relationship, started.
Okay. So Merca make, I suppose you would describe it as industrial equipment, mainly centering along abrasive materials. So things like sandpaper, grit paper, the things that builders, DIY enthusiasts, and everybody in between uses with construction. But the main product that we provide them inkjet machinery for is their sandpaper. So they're based in Finland. I was just talking to a colleague today. I always seem to visit in the middle of winter. I don't think I've ever been there in the summertime yet. It was. It's actually been a real pleasure to work with them as a company. We've been doing it quite a while now. So I started talking to them back in 2017, and they came to us with a project. Little bit of internal misunderstandings. It was actually quite close to us not working with them at one stage, but thankfully we did, and it's been a pleasant roller coaster ever since.
Fantastic. And what was it about IIJ's technology that made them come to you with the project that they initially wanted you to work with them on? And what was that project?
Okay, so the original project was to print onto sandpaper before the grit is applied. That sent up a fairly universal prayer once that was clarified, because the last thing you want to be doing is printing onto actual sand. That would have been difficult. And the reason they came to us, I believe, just thinking back on it now, was I think because although they had the competence, and I do mean a lot of competence within the company, to be doing these things for themselves, I think they had better and more varied avenues that they wanted to travel. And they wanted to put the, responsibility on a professional company to do this for them, rather than spending the time doing it for themselves, which was quite nice and reassuring to hear, actually, because it made us very much aware of the fact that they had a lot of competence and expertise within the company, which you don't always find. So it was a really nice breath of fresh air in that regard. And the first machine, or first project rather, was outside of our comfort zone, I would say. It was a larger than standard system, which means that they also pushed us to develop something that we hadn't before, and it was the first of its kind. So from a sort of blue sky project kind of situation, we had a lot of fun doing that as well.
Fantastic. And that's really interesting. You know, what kind of made you step outside that comfort zone, and how did you achieve it? You know, it's something that you hadn't done before. How did you make that happen for your customer?
Well, luckily, IIJ is a company that steps outside of its comfort zone a lot. It's what we're known for. In the industry, I think we are the kind of company that if you have a project that isn't standard and you don't have a solution for it, and you're struggling with this, a lot of customers have historically come to us So we are known in the industry as people that can solve a problem. So that's where a lot of our projects come from. Not so much anymore, I have to say, which is something of a relief for an account manager. So it's not all completely outlandish, more and more standard as time has gone on. But just for the fact that we're known for this and we're willing to do it, where a lot of other companies aren't. A lot of other companies have a prescriptive product that doesn't always fit into what customers want. So, I think we're just known out there, and that's why a lot of people come our way. I think that's what we're doing. And in terms of how we accomplished it, we've got huge amount of resources within the company for managing these kinds of projects and the engineering required to go into it. So IIJ as a company, it's not your normal box shifting kind of print engine company. It's very much that we are used to being able to look at a problem and devise a solution for it. So that was pretty much part of the course for us, actually.
Yeah, fantastic. And it seems like that's kind of put you in good stead with this particular customer. It seems like they, like you, kind of push the boundaries of these projects and what they want. And so you worked with them for some time initially. How did that relationship develop into them kind of coming back and wanting to look at expanding on that and doing something new with the technology?
So, the way it works for us at the very beginning of these conversations is to absolutely delve into what the customer requires, what they're actually trying to achieve. There's very little point in us trying to be, this is what you need. It's more along the lines of you tell us everything and we work together. So that relationship has a lot of give and take, which sometimes does mean, increased amount of time in initial discussions. But that generally really works out in our favour in that regard. And the relationship itself is, once you've been talking to someone for this long and you have your point of contact, and luckily mine is very much, shall I say, a Renaissance man in terms of the fact that he knows a lot about everything. So I only need one central point of contact in this case. And that relationship, you build trust and you build the ability to talk about anything you need to talk about. So neither side has this problem where you sort of think to yourself, oh, I can't tell them bad news, or I don't want to speak to them today for whatever reason. That's not the kind of thing you want to do when having this long-term kind of relationship. And in terms of moving from the first print system onto the subsequent ones, it really comes down to the basics. We proved what we could do. We did print samples, we did it on their material, we did it at their production speed. They came here back when you could still travel and watched it being done. They saw all of our different machinery they have around. And what was a difficulty for them at the time, they saw pretty quickly was just not a difficulty for us. And, they gained faith and we gained the ability to understand what they wanted and what their competencies were. So there was a lot of mutual back and forth, and I'll say it again, there was a lot of trust all round. And when that first system was a success and when we proved what we could do, it became very obvious that turning to IIJ was an easier solution for them than struggling to do it in-house. So we just then went on to the next project and the next project. So.
That's really interesting when you talk about, you're obviously speaking to them for some time. I think perhaps one of the challenges or maybe just the realities of working on something that is outside the comfort zone, working on something that is a very highly tailored solution. There is that long lead time. There is a long development time. How do you kind of manage expectations on that, and how does IIJ tackle that kind of the fact that this is quite a long-term process that we're talking about?
Well, I think Merck were very easy in that regard because of their technical expertise and what they've done in the past. They understood that this wasn't going to be just a simple, let's print out some glossy label samples, prove what we can do, sell them a print engine. It was never going to be that. So in terms of managing expectations, there wasn't really a lot for me to do in that particular regard with Merck specifically. But across the board, it's absolutely necessary, because a lot of what we do, while the machinery is fairly standard, I mean, it's based on some core designs, and you can extrapolate out or add different things. So it's not like we're building from scratch every single time, not at all. But the end application that the customer wants to see, that is always different. So being able to speak honestly and upfront with your customer, and just the ability to say, look, I've got to be honest with you, this is not going to be a snap your fingers and here's a print engine for you. It's going to take time. And once you get into the detail of that, once you start talking about everything you need to know, it becomes fairly obvious to our customers that this is more than just a plug and play, here's Inkjet in the corner of your office kind of situation.
Yeah. And I think that's it is about that building that trust and that kind of honest communication, isn't it? We've one of the concepts that underpins the Tech Fest that we're doing now, and we've got panels centered around it, is that the 5 steps for success, and collaboration, communication, all plays into that. I know John Corral of IIJ is taking part in one of those panels as well. So yeah, I think you've built that long-term relationship. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the process from from the initial relationship building to taking us through to where we are now, or where we were with previous projects that you've worked on. I know that it could be something that we if we had more time, I'd like to hear the whole story. But
I could talk about Merck for an entire day and still not all the details. I'll sort of dip into a bit about our sales process, but it does change from customer to customer, and sometimes what we do is not prescriptive. You have to be able to read the situation, and that's a lot of what we did here. I think if I'd have followed an exact sales process with Merck, they would have been completely frustrated with me almost to the beginning, and it wouldn't have gone as well as it has. But what we first do when we start talking to a customer is get as many details as possible. That is everything from what is the product, what is the print speed, what is your desired result, what is the material, is there any post-process, is there any pre-process, how is the image file presented. We will go into the software requirements, camera system requirements, what is your preferred method of curing. I mean, there are so many different elements that you have to find out about, because IIJ operates as a hub. If you think about it, it's like, spokes on a bike. We deal with a lot of different elements, and it all comes down to the center of what IIJ does, and this is the system that we provide. So we have to know about everything. We have to know how the material is transported to the resolution of printing required, what kind of ink is required, testing of that ink, proving it at production speed. So there's a lot of information that we have to gather to make sure that we haven't missed anything out. And, even with the best will in the world, something will be found out last minute, but we do try to mitigate that by getting everything up front. And then once we have that information, and once everybody is all at the same point, that is when I start to bring in other departments within the company. So If it's going to require a degree of engineering, I give them a heads up. If it's going to be a type of ink that we don't have readily available, then I'll go to the ink testing department or R&D and get them sourcing something. There's a lot of different people. It's not just me. It's gathering all of the years of knowledge within IIJ and bringing it all together to be cohesive. So there's probably a fair amount of project management that goes into these kinds of things. And it's getting everybody to the stage where everybody is comfortable, where you can say, okay, this is the type of machine that you want, this is the specification, and here, this is what it's going to look like, presenting that to the customer, and in a very oversimplified version, getting them to agree and order it. So, and then you have to move on to the rest of it, and after sales and everything that's included there. But from a sales perspective, it's just talking as much as possible. There's just a lot of talking involved.
And it makes it that collaborative process, doesn't it? You're not just a company selling something to a customer. All that talking is consultative and the result of a true partnership, and helps you create an end result that is bespoke to their needs.
Yeah, it is. That's the exact words. It is a partnership. If someone holds back information or isn't fully in that partnership, chances are something's going to go wrong. And in dealing with Merca, that has never been an issue. I will get a phone call from my contact. He gives me a heads up if he's seen something that he thinks I should know about, and vice versa. We know that it's that kind of situation where you don't worry about what the reception is going to be. It's going to be okay. Either this is news that's good, in case, yay, but if something is going on that someone needs to know about, that the other person is there to help you solve a problem, not to say, this is something you've got to deal with and then just sit back and let someone else panic or whatever. So, yeah, there's a lot of partnership involved in that. Yeah.
And it's a long-term partnership. Obviously, you've had that talking process. You delivered something that they were obviously happy with because they've come back. How have their needs evolved, or the additional needs going beyond what you initially delivered for them, and how have you tackled the kind of the future challenges that they've come up with or come to you with?
It has been quite wild and varied, I have to say. If it was just repeats of exactly the same project, I think my samples team would have a lot less work on their hands in that regard. So there have been a lot of different projects come up since the very first one. Some are moving forward, some are not. That's just life. It's different materials. Luckily, the ink has remained the same, so that's quite nice. But there's always different little snippets that come up, little surprises, something to sink your teeth into, which is quite nice. And in terms of future projects, it's nice to know that it's not all the same thing all the time. I mean, it's nice to have an idea of where the company is going and how they want to expand or do different things. And they're very open to new developments of ours. So if we say to them, we've got a new ink, it does this, we've got a new print head, it does that, we have a new design coming along, is this going to be useful? It's a very good thing to be able to go to your customer and just say, hey, look, we've done something different, what do you think? And vice versa. I mean, I get tips from him on, how to improve our own systems. So it's incredibly collaborative in that regard. It's very good to have a an engineer on the end of the phone that you can have that chat with. So yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, fantastic. Really does sound like it's a partnership, and it's, you know, you can come to them with new products, and also the fact that you're so often in contact with your customers means I'm sure that they're informing the developments that IIJ makes as well, you know, your whole customer base.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was going through my records earlier, as I said, and the amount of emails is just shocking. I think we're probably going to overload our databases just on this one customer alone. I would say we're in communications about 2 or 3 times a week as standard, just on a variety of different things. So it's really good, and it's been completely mutual in that regard. It is a true partnership.
Fantastic. And I think it'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about the specifics, you know, as much as we can of what you've delivered. I know that there has been development of you know, they required kind of a wider than they had gone before, and there were some elements that were you know, IIJ's main area of expertise, some things that were slightly out of the comfort zone. Maybe we could talk specifically about the solutions that have been delivered to this customer.
Yeah, I mean, the first system was not one of our standard size systems. I'd say it was potentially about 30% larger than what we usually do in terms of print width. And the way we went about it, although it pushed us to actually design that machine, we also future-proofed it for ourselves in the fact that we didn't just want one extra model of print engine to go with all of the other models that we've designed. We wanted to be able to go up to a certain print width. We wanted to be able to do either mono, so single color, or CMYK. We wanted it to be able to take a variety of different print heads, depending on what future customers wanted. So it enabled us and gave us this project where instead of having to try to find out what the marketplace wanted, which is a slow process in and of itself, it enabled us to say, okay, we're going this large, and we are going to make it available to all other customers as well. So we don't just have a custom built machine that no one else is going to use. So in that regard, it really was a bonus for us. And then making the system so that it was sound for the environment that it was going into, and making sure it was fit for purpose. As I said, it was a completely different type of ink as well. So there was a lot of process that went into the building of that machine to make sure that any other customer that came along, this was a sound piece of kit that would stand up to, you know, rigorous different environmental pressures, and make it worthwhile to design in the first place. So that really, it worked in both our situations, for both the customer and for us. So that was a good one to start off with. And then, you know, of course, the next ones that they went for were completely standard. So it was fairly simple in comparison. Yeah, it was.
And what about from there? Then they lulled you into a false sense of security with something standard, and then pushed the boundaries again. Is that right?
Yes, of course. It's what Merca does to us. So the next ones were actually the smaller systems that we built. So only the width of a single print head. The installation was slightly different in the situation and location that they wanted it installed. So while there was engineering involved, it wasn't that we had to change any designs of machinery. It was more along the lines of we had to make sure that it will fit where they wanted it to fit, and working between our engineers and theirs to make sure that it was a cohesive project that didn't end up with, you know, some weird orientation that can't actually print once it's on the line. But the machinery itself, yeah, that was incredibly standard. The next one.
And just looking at, just while we're on that with the kind of installation and that kind of thing, I know, like you said, you go over to Finland when it's nice and chilly, and with COVID, how has that been affected? How has that affected the relationship there and the work that you're doing with them?
In regards to what we're doing with them, because the next two were very standard and because they had the level of expertise, I mean, I'll say it again because it's worth repeating, they are a remarkably self-sufficient customer. They don't need a lot of hand-holding. They're incredibly competent. So the two machines, the narrow web ones, went in at the end of last year. So height of the pandemic, we weren't able to go in and install, but they were perfectly capable of doing it themselves. So with remote assistance, using Teams and mobile phones and pre typed up instructions, they were able to do that for themselves. And to be honest, the situation with COVID hasn't slowed us down in terms of installations. We've done a lot of remote installations last year and into the first part of this year. I'm sure John has probably done a presentation on it at some point, but we've installed in Japan remotely, which means people staying up through the night and doing the night shift in order to support them. And these are not Inkjet savvy people, and they've been able to do it themselves with our guidance. So installations have not dropped off. If anything, they've probably increased because we don't have to actually hop on a plane.
Yeah,
and it's been going really well. So that's never been an issue. And especially with Merca, I think they're getting to the point when they might not actually need our help moving forwards. So yeah, they're fully trained up at this point.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've definitely spoken to John previously about the remote installations. It's a fantastic job you guys are doing on that. And what about where we are now? I am conscious we're running a little bit out of time. Went really, really fast. And yeah, just where we are now, I believe there's still some testing ongoing. Is that right with Merca?
Yeah, I mean, we're supporting them in that, and there's a few different projects ongoing at the moment. I can't get into a huge amount of detail, but they are the next couple are wildly different from each other. So they're pushing our boundaries again. So we are going wider format, which will mean a whole new design for them. So fingers crossed that will all work out fine. And then as per normal, we go back into fairly standard print engines thereafter. So they seem to be keeping us on our toes in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it's progressing fairly normally. They come to me when they have questions. I go to them when I have questions. It's moving along smoothly. Yeah, so it's all good.
Well, that is fantastic to hear. It all sounds so positive and it's so great. You don't always get, customers that have specific solutions and these relationships that want to shout about, the partnerships and what that entails. So really grateful to you and to Merca for being willing to let us talk about this and get some real insight into the process that IIJ has and the we've really taken it from conception to where we are now and given a really nice overview or what we can fit into half an hour overview of what that entails. I'm sure your job, Nadina, involves a lot more than that.
Oh yes, I think if I had to give you a detailed rundown, it would probably take a day and a half of a video. And bore everybody to tears. But yeah, we've been very lucky with our relationship with them. They are a fabulous company to work with. So, ups and downs, but through it all, the relationship is held, and that's what we always hope for with every customer.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like a great partnership. Thank you again for sharing the information about it. Thank you to everyone watching. That's been me, Karis Kopp, talking to Nadina Using of Industrial Inkjet Limited. Thanks again, Nadina.
No worries. Happy to help.
Fantastic. And thank you to everyone watching. Please keep watching. There's more great content on the way from the Future Print Tech Fest, but it's bye for now.